Welcome to Wheat or Chaff. And I have got to tell you, I've been so excited about this special time that we're going to have today. Today is February the 4th, and we have one of our panelists, Valerie Whitaker. She has volunteered and said yes to me when I said, can you please give us just an interview with you? I think it's important for everyone to get to know the Wheat or Chaff panel and just having some special time with Valerie. So we're going to call this Special Time with Valerie. Valerie, welcome to your show, Wheat or Chaff.
Thank you. Thank you.
The individual, what are we going to call it? The panelist version. So tell us a little bit about yourself. We know Roger. Roger's your husband.
Yes, so Roger's my husband. Between the two of us, we have 4 kids, and we have 8 grandchildren. We both grew up in Ohio and moved to East Tennessee a little over 20 years ago, and we adore being here. We love it.
Yeah, it is beautiful. East Tennessee, you're in the Knoxville area, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
For those of you who are in East Tennessee, and you happen to go to your local grocery store and you may run into Valerie, you can say, hey, I saw you on Wheat or Chaff. And I want people to understand I think I'm just going to call it your desire, your spiritual path right now, or the season that you're in, as you teach us about the bride and the mountains, and where did that come from? How did you get involved with that? How did the Lord lead you to learning more about that?
You know, I have been on a very interesting journey over about the course of 6 years. I mean, I've really always had a relationship with God, because I grew up in so much chaos. And I had mentioned, previously that I came from a very abusive household. And so I learned to pray at an early age, even when we weren't allowed to go to church, because my mom would actually black out, wouldn't know what she was doing. And I learned that if I prayed and asked God to make her go to sleep, she would lay down and go to sleep. And
how did you know to pray, Valerie? How did you know?
Oh, gosh. Well, we did go to church some. Like, we would have times when we went to church a lot. And then there were times when she decided God didn't exist and we weren't allowed to go to church. And so what the Lord did is he moved a family in down the street from us that had a little girl my age, and her dad was a pastor.
Wow.
And they were my lifeline. They were awesome.
Okay.
So one of the other things that I learned when I was very little was the story of how David would sing to King Saul when the tormenting spirits would come. And that would happen to my mom. And she would not allow me to read the Bible to her, but we had a couple old hymnals, don't know where they came from, but she would let me sing to her.
Wow.
And I would literally sing her back into her right mind. And
wow.
So you would think that I grew up being some kind of a spiritual giant. Not really. It was all out of survival,
Yeah.
But I knew in some way that in the midst of all the chaos, God was there. And I maybe wasn't protected from all things, but she didn't have the opportunity to kill us, which she, threatened a lot. And it was a very real possibility. So, so for you to understand where I'm at now, it helps to know that I did not grow up in an idyllic situation at all. So I've had to overcome a lot, a whole lot, and a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. So, so then fast forward, and in the last 6 years, what God's done with me, about 6 years ago, we had something called the altar at our church, and it was the first time that we did it. And
is this an event?
Yeah, it was an event.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And a prophet came in. He knew our pastor, but he didn't know the congregation. And he prophesied over me. And just a little bit of that prophecy, the Lord said through him, you will know, he said, I'm going to cause you to rest. You will know that I am, that I am, that I am, that I am. You know I'm God, but you're going to know who I am, where I am, what I am, and why I am. And when he said why, I thought to myself, Lord, I wouldn't even know to ask that question.
Yeah.
And so that was just a really small part of that prophetic word. And I knew when he said, I'm going to cause you to rest, that he had been telling me I needed to let go of a lot of positions at church. We helped launch a church. We didn't have a bigger organization backing us. So those of us that launched that church had to work hard, and we wore many hats. And so I have been trying to let go of a lot of those positions, and I couldn't find anybody to take them. So you know how that goes. And I was on my way out the door for a 7 a.m. meeting and stepped off the porch, hit the stepping stones between the porch and the driveway wrong, and went down like a sack of potatoes. And I had twisted my ankle really, really bad. Like I felt it dislocate. Had to crawl back in the house and just laid on the floor till my husband could come and get me. And my daughter-in-law was here. She happened to be awake. We iced my foot, all that. So while I was recovering from that, the Lord started putting that prophetic word into motion. And it was so cool. I had a friend, and she's a really good friend now. She was barely a friend then. And she said, you need to listen to Quantum Physics and the Glory of God. And I'm like, okay, it's on YouTube. It's a 7-part video. It was kind of mind-numbing because this is a quantum physicist talking about this. But what was amazing is he starts off by saying, I am going to teach you why God is light. And I went, oh, you're going to answer that first?
I'm going to teach you why God is liked.
Light, L-I-G-H-T.
Light.
Is light.
Okay.
And I was just like, seriously, you're going to answer that one first? So I thought that was really cool. And that just opened up a whole new world to me and just kind of blew my mind about just the glory of God.
Tell us again what the name of the YouTube.
It's either Quantum Physics and the Glory of God, or it's the Glory of God and Quantum Physics. And it's a 7-part video. So as I listened to it, like I said, he's a quantum physicist, dry, and way over my head. And I would start to get a little frustrated, and Lord would say, don't worry about it. Just glean what you glean, pick up what you can pick up. And it really did it. It set me on a whole different trajectory for how I viewed God, which was really awesome. And I needed that. It just made him so much more grand and real to me. It was really, really awesome. So from there, he just started changing things, and he started talking to me about taking back some things in our inheritance as Christians that the enemy has stolen. And when he first said that to me, I was sitting at a computer, and I literally just sat back and was like, what's that have to do with me? Of course, there was dead silence. He was not going to dignify me with an answer. And so it's interesting how God talks to me, because he'll just like say things out of the blue, and it's almost like, hey, have you heard this one? You know? And so I have a tendency to kind of talk to him like that too.
Right.
So like walking through the house a few days later, and I just stop and I said, okay, God, here's the deal. And I bet he's going, all right, give me the deal.
But you know what? That's him being our Abba. You know,
yes.
when he's our daddy, you talk to him like he's our daddy. It's not a sign of disrespect. If anything, it's a sign of reverence to my father, my daddy. I can talk to my daddy because I'm his kid. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And I know that he's not offended by it. And I know he just
Right.
kind of chuckles at me like, all right, come on, bring it on.
Mhm.
Let me hear it,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I said, I'll do what you're asking me to do, but I need you to make a clear way that lines up with the Word of God.
Mm-hmm.
And through that path, he started to teach me how to get free, like how to get free from demonic strongholds.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where my love is.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see people free, because he said, I want you to start reclaiming parts of your inheritance. That is the inheritance of the bride.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And all of this goes into preparing the bride. And unfortunately, somewhere through Christendom, there's been things that we've just handed over to the enemy and said, we have no use for this.
Mm.
And he never intended for us to do that.
Like?
Oh gosh, like, this may sound silly, but like I use essential oils.
Mm-hmm.
I use therapeutic grade essential oils. You would not believe how many people that has known me for a long time are like, oh, you've gone new age. No, I haven't.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely not. God created these.
Mm-hmm.
He created them for a purpose.
Right.
I'm reclaiming that purpose. So that kind of thing.
And that makes sense, because literally, if you look at what Mary was given, she was given herbs, oils,
Mm-hmm.
frankincense, and myrrh.
Yeah.
And if you think about what those are used for, I remember studying this, and you would know better than I, but isn't myrrh for sickness? Or frankincense is to heal the body of wounds and
Mm-hmm.
cuts, and knowing that as a child he might need that, but in the long run, Jesus dying on the cross and being beaten,
Mm-hmm.
that was a signifying that this is his future.
Right.
And
And myrrh is also for burial.
Okay, yeah.
And
Wow.
they do a lot of things. They both are very healing.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, that was one of the things that it signified.
Okay, for birth.
And
so for people to say new age, that's what you're saying. They've given over the power that we have in the natural things that God gave us, and would rather take a pill,
yeah,
or take an injection, or take a surgery, as opposed to living life to the fullest with the natural things that God created from the ground. And all of a sudden, we're new age or hippies.
Yes, exactly.
That's a very good example of taking back what is ours.
Yeah.
So now the bride, you're saying the bride is to reclaim her position, and the bride, is that correct?
Yes. So there's everything that's been created has been created to prepare the bride.
Okay, now wait a minute. For those who have not, who is the bride?
Is the church. Those who love Jesus.
Is it literally the church building, or people who call themselves followers of Christ?
Those who call themselves followers of Christ and bear the fruit of it.
Okay, all right. So whether they go into a building or not.
Right.
Gotcha. And that's important, especially for our viewers, because they might think the church gets them saved and the church sends them to heaven. And that's not the church. The building doesn't do that. Yeah.
The building doesn't do that. It's the Spirit of God working in us. And that's what he wants. He wants relationships. He wants us to hear him, to see him, to trust him. I told you that God will just like kind of speak, just like he'll just say something. One day I was out on the back deck, and he said, Emmanuel, God with us? And I was like, yes, I love that. Baby Jesus came, And he said, I still mean that. And I was like, what? And he said, Emmanuel, God with us, is just as much for today as it was when Jesus came to the earth in bodily form.
Mhm.
And that was really cool because what he did is he confirmed something is when I would go out, we have trails, like we have a couple acres here where we live.
Mhm.
And part of that is wooded and we've mowed trails through the woods. And so I'll go out there and I'll walk and I'll pray. And there have been times when I've seen visions of Jesus meeting me on the trail.
Mm.
And it's just really, really precious time.
Mhm.
So he was confirming to me that I wasn't making that up.
Yeah, yeah. He's with us. Yeah. Yeah. All constantly. Never left us. Yeah.
And that we should be able to see him. Not, you
Mhm.
know what I'm saying? It's not like
Mhm.
24 hours a day, every day.
Right.
And
Right.
some people
Yes.
might,
Mhm.
that really there are some people. I think there is one person I know of that, she sees in the spiritual realm and the natural realm 24 hours
Mhm.
a
Would
day.
that be Kat?
Cat.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but he really does want that relationship and
Yes.
he wants us to be prepared.
Mhm.
And what we're being prepared for is to bring the nations as our dowry to Jesus.
Okay. Bring the nations.
hmm So in Psalms,
Mhm.
it's a prophetic word, but it's like Father God talking to Jesus, and he says, "I will give you the nations as your inheritance."
Okay.
But he wants to partner with the bride to do that.
And how do we know that? Where are you seeing that he wants to partner with the bride to do that?
Because everything that's been created has been created to prepare the bride.
Okay.
And in the things of earth that
Mhm.
are in alignment with God reflect the things of heaven.
Right.
So in the Jewish culture, and not just that culture, but we're going to talk about them because they're God's people.
Mhm. Mhm.
The bride brings a dowry
Yes.
to the husband when she gets married.
Yes.
So it's in the realm of that same pattern.
Mhm. Mhm.
You don't come to the King of Kings. You don't come to your kinsman redeemer. You
Mhm.
don't come to your one true love
Right.
without something. You don't
Right.
come empty-handed.
Yes.
But in that process, he pours himself out. We're
Mhm.
betrothed. When we come to him, when we get saved and we come to him and we, enter into this relationship, he pours out on us because we are his betrothed. We are to, in a sense, we're his betrothed. Now
Mhm.
that covenant is a little different in the Jewish culture where uh, it's like when Joseph was
Mhm.
betrothed to
To Mary.
Mary,
Right.
it was
Mhm.
already a binding covenant.
Right. Yep. Mhm.
It was already receiving
Mhm.
part of, or maybe all of, um, the benefits
Mhm.
of
The
being in that
marriage.
relationship
Right.
with him.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay.
Right. And that's why that's why God said, do not lay with Mary.
Mm-hmm.
They were betrothed, but
Yeah.
the actual wedding was the celebration of it. It wasn't
Yeah.
necessary. Yeah. So the wedding was just what you celebrate for already being in the contract or in the covenant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. That would be basically really the consummation of it.
Mhm. Yeah. And so
So,
we are betrothed to God,
yeah,
and we're living with the benefits, but we don't
right.
even know we have those benefits fully.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
so that's what it is learning how to live
Mhm.
in the authority he's already given us,
Mhm. Mhm.
learning how to live in the integrity that he's already given
Mhm.
us. The I know we're going to talk about the seven mountains, but as a part of that, you've got the mountain of the Lord. This is kind of separate from the seven mountains. You have the mountain of the Lord, and the
Mhm.
Lord said to me one day, how did he say that? You've heard it said that upon the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. And I was like, yeah. And he
Mhm.
said, what's being provided? And I was like, abundance.
Yeah.
And
It's the easy go-to.
yeah.
Abundance.
And he said, look it up. That's
Mhm.
what he tells me all the time. Look it
Mhm.
up. And so I went home and I looked it up and I read through the passage. What's actually being provided on the mountain of the Lord is everything we need to worship.
So wait, so we worship on the mountain of the Lord.
That's because Abraham took Isaac up on the mountain of the
That's
Lord
right.
to
That's
sacrifice him
right.
to worship.
Worship.
And he said, me and the lad will worship and we will
Right.
come back.
Okay,
So
but worship doesn't, we as the typical Christian thinks worship is just singing a worship song, which worship is bigger, broader, and deeper than that.
It is.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
It is. So
But
what I
hold
did,
on. Does worship mean our lives are become the worship? Living our lives in worship? I don't, what would signify worship? Everything we do would be acknowledging him in, would the acknowledging of who he is be worship?
I would think so, like how we worship, how we live, being in relationship with him, you know, honoring the covenant that we have with him.
Gotcha. Okay.
Those are things, you know, we worship with our giving, you know, with kindness, just.
Yeah. Our acts and our deeds are
Yeah.
the form, the outer of the inner worship that we have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's good.
So what I did is I looked up, because I wanted to know what the what was. Okay.
Yeah.
I found out that what's being provided is everything we need to worship. But what does that mean? So I actually searched significance of Mountain of the Lord. And I believe I found it in Bible Study Tools. And it listed the following things. Oh, wow. Watch me go blank.
That's okay.
Okay. So strength, stability, righteousness, authority, victory, great joy, not just any joy, great joy, because the oil of joy was poured out on Jesus more than on any other, and abundance. And what he spoke to me is that abundance isn't just material things.
Right.
That is the abundance of all that he is. So that is the abundance of the fruit of the Spirit, of the 7 spirits of God. It's the abundance of all that he is in his character. And he gives us all of that so that we can worship, so that we can live our lives as a living sacrifice to him.
Valerie, I want to say something here. The list that you just gave, you pulled it out of your memory. Bravo. Number one. Number two, it goes back to people thinking New Age, when in actually it is ancient of age, ancient of days. And when we do live like that, how much more will our physical, this skin, this flesh that we live in, how much more will that be enhanced, not just in health, but radiating? And you said strength, because everything happens inside out. Everything happens spirit to natural. So when we can live in the spirit with all of those, I don't even, gifts, all of those all of those, what would you call them? All those ways of worship.
Yeah, they're blessings. So he's giving us, he gives us those things so that we can worship. Because without strength and stability, righteousness and authority, we'll never have victory.
Right.
And that victory brings great joy. And then fresh revelation is deep calls to deep, Holy Spirit mining out the mysteries of God. And then when you've got that, then you have the abundance of who God is in his fullness, which is like so cool. So empowering.
So now this is for the bride. This is what the bride has.
Yes.
We already have it. We don't have to ask for it. We already have it.
Right.
It's just a matter of us going forth and taking what is ours.
Right. Understanding that it's ours so that we can live and war from the place of victory.
Live and war from the place of victory.
Yes.
Right.
We already have the victory.
Already have it. Yeah. It is finished. Yeah.
Right.
Completed.
Yes.
Everything. Wow. So, okay, so now we have the bride. We know who that
Okay.
is.
Right.
And the bride is preparing the nations to gather the nations, or is the bride the nation?
It's kind of both. Because the bride of Christ are the true fruit-bearing Christians all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not just talking about the United States,
No,
even
of course
though
not.
we have a special dispensation in a
Mm-hmm.
sense because of how God created us. Like he
Right.
took Israel out of nothing
Mm-hmm.
and he said, Abraham, I'm going to make you a nation.
Right.
He did a little bit of the same thing
Mm-hmm.
with the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
He created the United States of America to be able to bring his word to the nations.
Right.
And
Now,
most of the gospel that's gone out has gone out from here to the nations, but discipling the nations also, they have been being discipled, but there's some nuances there that come in with the 7 mountains.
now let's say this. Let's let our viewers know. We understand that Native Americans were here before it was the United States of America.
Yes.
However, if we really delve into Native Americans and how they worship their God, who is our God, we will be so enlightened that this is why God led us into this nation. Because Native Americans, you want to talk about what someone would say is new age or whatever, they have a connection to the earth. They have a connection to God, to the sky. Valerie posted a beautiful sunrise of bright pink. Was it sunrise, Valerie, or last night sunset?
Yeah, no, that was sunrise.
Bright pink. And if you've ever been to, I'm going to say, to East Tennessee and gone to the Chihuahua Skyway Drive, you will see in autumn, in the fall, you will see every color of the rainbow. Every color. There's no color that man has created that God hasn't already shown us. Literally, Valerie's sky was magenta pink. And then there were shades of baby pink and soft pink and bright pink. It was just gorgeous. So I truly believe that the Native Americans who were on this soil before any other country or culture came here, they know who God is. And they worship God of the earth, which is our God who created the earth, So us meaning the people who came into this country to establish a Christian base, a safe base away from the hierarchy. As if you've ever heard Roger speak, go back to the YouTube on the wheat or chaff and Roger will explain it. But there is a sense, as Valerie's saying, there is a sense of God placed us here because it already had the foundation, said God loves the Native Americans and how much they love the land that he created for them. And I grew up in New England, so I know the Pilgrims and the Native Americans had to get together, and there were bad Pilgrims and there were bad Native Americans, but they made it work because there was a sense of your God is my God. And that's a foundation first. If you want to talk to another culture, your God is my God, says a lot. So I just wanted to explain that, Valerie, as far as you're right. This country, it was formed before. It wasn't considered a country, it was land. And then we came in, but God has a special heart for the United States of America Republic. Go ahead.
Yes. And two, if you recall that the very first people that landed here would have died if the Native Americans had not helped them and taught them how to live here. And that's what God intended. God intended for it to have that kind of unity.
Yes.
And, but corruption comes in, right?
Of course.
And
but that's biblical too. We know.
Yeah.
I mean, if corruption is going to come into the Garden of Eden, of all places, expect it in your backyard too.
Yeah. So, what was I saying now?
Well, we were talking about preparing the nation, and you said the bride is not just this nation, even though America has a special place, but the bride is all nations.
Right.
Those who follow Christ followers across the world.
Right. And I love how there are so many Americans, so many nations right now that are praying for America.
Yeah.
I love that so much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift to the 7 mountains. And I want to just talk a little bit about like what basically the 7 mountains are.
Great. Yeah.
But I also want to talk about, and this is revelation that God gave me. So the basic 7 mountains teaching comes from Lance Wallnau, 7 Mountains Mandate. You look that up on YouTube.
Okay.
And when I learned about this just a couple years ago, it was another one of those things that just changed everything for me. It was so eye-opening.
Now, I'm going to stop you because we have about 7 minutes, but I want to be specific. When we look it up on YouTube, I looked up 7 Mountains, Lance Wallnau, and it was a 7-minute, but there's a longer one, correct?
Yeah, he does several teachings. There's several teachings on it.
But you can get a longer one if you really want to study it. I just want people to know that they can go and see more than just the 7-minute one. Okay, go ahead. And I won't interrupt anymore. Go ahead.
You might even put in 7 Mountain Mandate.
Okay.
Lance Wallnau, and it's WALLNAU is his last name. Okay, so the 7 mountains basically are, okay, first of all, the 7 mountains are not, I don't know how to say this. They were not necessarily God's mountains in the beginning. He made everything, so he owns it all, right? But these are areas that, if you think about when Satan took Jesus up and he showed him the nations of the world, and I think that there are, it's said different ways in different versions, but he showed him the mountains of the world and said,
that's what I was going to ask you. Where is it biblically? So it's where Satan tempts Jesus and he takes him up after his 40-day fast.
Right. Okay. And so he's like, I'll give you these if you'll just worship me. Well, Jesus is like, no, thanks. I already own them. Right. But we know that the devil is in this earth, and he's working against everything that has anything to do with God.
Right.
Okay. So the 7 mountains are, I call it the church mountain. Can be called the religion mountain, but for my purposes, it's the church mountain. Family mountain, arts and entertainment, media, business, education, and government. Okay, so those are the 7. And what the Lord showed me was that I was actually reading an excellent book called Arise, and it's written by Larry Sparks, and I just went blank on the lady's name. But if you look up Arise, and it's really written for women, but really it's good for men too. I read a lot of it to Roger. As I was reading that, toward the end, it referenced and had a scripture from Exodus 3, where God is talking to Moses and he's saying, hey, I heard the cry of the Israelites, and they were in their 400 years of bondage, and I'm going to deliver them, and and I'm going to take them into the land of milk and honey, and into where the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Hivites and the Jebusites and the Perizzites are. And so he's telling this to Moses, and I kind of got a chuckle out of it, because I imagine Moses is going, this is awesome. And then at the end, God says, and I'm sending you. And he's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I hear you, Moses. I get that.
Yeah.
So as I read that list of the giants, I heard very clearly the Holy Spirit say, you're still supposed to dispossess them today. And I went, what?
Dispossess them?
Dispossess them today.
Okay.
And I was like, what? And he said, look them up. I'm like, okay. So I did some research, and one of the things that God has been teaching me, and I referenced it, I don't want to go into it because it's a whole big thing all of itself, is something that it's called emotional release. But those emotions that you're releasing are actually strongholds. But here's the thing. God says don't reverence anything, don't reverence anything that's not me. By calling it a stronghold, you're automatically elevating it.
Exactly. Yeah. Look at my response. My response was, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Strongholds is, yeah. I get
So if you call it a trapped emotion, you can get rid of a trapped emotion. So what I did is, as I read about the 7 giants, the characteristics of the different giants, and wrote them down, I realized, wait, these are emotions. These are strongholds. These are things that we can get rid of. So he then showed me how the giants line up with the 7 mountains.
Okay.
So when I talk about the 7 giants, for instance, the giant, and these are just the 7 original giants. I know there's more giants than 7, but these are the ones he's given me to work with. Okay, so for the church mountain, the giant that comes against it is the Hittite. And the Hittite means sons of terror. And it comes against the church mountain, sons of terror, dread. It attacks the emotions, nightmares, phobias, despair, torment, insecurity, anxiety, suicide, depression, sadness, rumors, speculations, subliminal torments, deceit, rejection, rage, anger, abuse of all forms, assault, feeling trapped, fear, false identity, unworthy, trauma, cynicism.
These are all emotional terror. It's terrorizing your emotions. Yes.
Right. And so that's how the Hittite works against
the
church. Okay. All of those different things. Now, as we know from reading the Bible, that the giants didn't necessarily come after Israel one at a time. They usually ganged up together.
Right.
Okay. So just so it's not like, oh, you're only going to deal with like the Hittite. But what this does is it helps you to see, like, when a situation presents itself to you, or you're looking at whatever, you can, by knowing the characteristics of these giants, you can identify what giant is trying to come against you, or come against your business or your family.
Or what mountain. Your giant is trying to come against what mountain.
Right. What mountain. So
so does the Hittite, they're only going to hit on your religion?
No, well, not necessarily.
Okay.
But like I said, they would like come together, you could have 5 giants attacking Israel.
Sure.
But it's kind of like with churches, Christian churches, we worship God, but we have some are going to be more of a helps ministry, and they're going to have food pantries and clothing pantries, where others may be raising up prophets and worship leaders. So, you have different specialties, you might say.
Sure.
Okay. So, so he showed me like which of the 7 mountains tend to be like the stronghold in each mountain. Okay. But then, and it was funny because he did this like one night, he was like, oh, hey, there's 7 mountains, there's 7 giants. I'm like, oh, wow. And, and then the next night, oh, there's 7 spirits of God. Wonder if they're part of that too. Oh, yeah. So then he showed me the 7 spirits of God and how they relate to the mountains. Again, different specialties, but they all work together. Okay.
Yeah.
So just because understanding is the Spirit of God that is more aligned with the family mountain, it doesn't mean that you're going to be lacking wisdom or counsel or love or any of that. Yeah. So for the church mountain, the ruling spirit of God is wisdom.
Wow. Okay. Now that makes, yeah. Hey, Valerie, I'm going to ask you something here. You're frozen, so I don't know if you can unfreeze. But I want to finish out this show and do a part 2 because I really want to get into, there you go, you're not frozen anymore. I really want to get into the 7 mountains. And I guarantee you, people will say, don't leave me hanging. You know, this is so good. And I really don't want to do a skimpy overview because this is, I can see right now how it correlates the mountains, the spirits, and the giants.
Yes.
And, you know, I love what you're saying right now, even though, I mean, everything you're saying is phenomenal, but it is like the best movie ever. I mean, there's no way that, C.L. Lewis, he couldn't have written this, you know? I mean, this is like incredible. But I think that's where a lot of people get their wisdom from when they do write these movies. So can we do a part 2? Would you mind doing a part 2?
Oh, I can do that.
Thank you. So we have to close out now because we're at our time. But again, I don't want to be disrespectful of your time nor of your message because it is so yummy and it's deep. So now everyone, I want you to go on YouTube and look at everything she said and go get, what's the name of the book?
Arise.
Arise. Have you remembered the woman's name?
No.
That's okay.
Larry Sparks
and it's okay. We'll get that on part 2. She'll get the name of the book on part 2. So I want to thank you, Valerie. And again, I don't mean to stop it now, but I just looked at the time and I was like, oh, I promised that we would only have a certain amount of, you know, we would only do this for a certain amount of time. But I knew this would be a part 2 because I asked Valerie, would you please speak about the Bride in the 7 Mountains? She went, okay, how long is this? So once again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Valerie. Please be aware of the part 2 that will be coming. We're calling this particular show, you know, Insights with Valerie, and it will be pretty much the bride and the beginning of the 7 mountains with more to come. So God bless y'all. Y'all, can you tell I used to live in Tennessee? God bless y'all, and we will see you in part 2. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you.